Welcome to the world today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about Pakistan's major issue, which is, of course, the fight against terrorism and our national priorities. How important is it for Pakistan to create a coherent policy dealing with terrorism and also those who support it? We also talk about the very unfortunate incident that took place in Quetta. 7 people were killed as a result of a suicide bomber that targeted a police truck on Zarhoon Road. We'll talk about that, and we'll also be talking about the relationship in which the US and Pakistan are engaged and in what direction it's heading. According to our defense minister, Pakistan has suspended military and intelligence cooperation with the US. That's what Mr. Majeed has had to say. We'll talk about that in detail as well. And we'll also talk about our National Security Advisor, Mr. Janjua, who has urged regional powers to cooperate and collaborate in the new emerging political scenario in the region. Let's get the conversation started. I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me today, we have AVM Ikram BHatti Saab, who's a regular on our show, defense analyst. And along with him, we have Hamza Khan. He's a special guest for us today. He's a student of international relations, studying in Canada. Welcome to the program, sir. Thank you very much for being here. Sir, first of all, our hearts go out to the victims of this terrible attack that took place in Quetta, sir. And how do you see this latest attack in Quetta, sir? Because it seems that the number of attacks recently have increased in Balochistan. So what's your reading of the situation, sir, especially in the backdrop of the changing dynamics between the US and Pakistan?
Well, it's a almost 16 years long war that we have been engaged in fighting against terror in this part of the world. And while we have made substantial gains, we have been able to cut down on these incidents, we have been able to arrest many people, execute some, and the extent and the intensity of terrorism has significantly declined in Pakistan, but unfortunately it has not died. It continues to linger on, it continues to surface off and on here and there. And the recent 2 incidents in Quetta, very tragic, very sad, and of course it continues to be, such incidents continue to be reminder to us that this menace has not died, and that we continue to maintain our focus, we continue to maintain our momentum. And of course, the nation has to get united, and the fact remains that whenever these incidents happen, of course, the terrorists are there, they cannot operate in isolation. We do find that they have their supporters, they have their sympathizers, they have their abettors, they have their facilitators, and the ownership of this war, I think, is still yet to be spread to every citizen of the country. I mean, that is why we feel that and we find that the intelligence agencies are not able to detect such intruders in time or away from their intended target, and they are able to not only infiltrate into Pakistan, but of course reach their intended target. So our narrative remains weak, and that is what is leading to sympathy for such people and their cause still existing within our ranks, and that is how they are able to find support and help, and they are able to reach their targets and achieve their aim. While we did come up with this national action plan, and they were well-meaning actions that were identified, but unfortunately not much has happened as a result of national action plan. And the most serious action was, of course, to develop a national narrative in this situation, which should galvanize the entire country, entire population, and unite them in this war against terror, and leave no one outside this ambit. And we find that be it incidents in Peshawar, be it incident in Quetta, where we find that most recently these incidents have occurred, that there are facilitators, there are supporters. Like for example, in this agriculture institute that we had this incident in Peshawar, they came in a rickshaw. So they must have arrived a day or two earlier. They must have spent some time within the city. They must have had some supporters over there, some facilitators who arranged their transportation and carriage of their weapons. So and they must have lived somewhere where they must be into the clear view of people around them, but nobody noticed, and they were able to move around unobstructed and reach their intended target. So the narrative is still weak. It's not yet very clear. The people are still not fully owning this war, and that is why we find that such like people are the terrorists are able to move around with little resistance and arrive at the place where they want to undertake their activity.
Right.
So this is, I think, narrative is something that is our biggest weakness today, and that is still allowing such incidents to continue to happen.
Absolutely, sir. The narrative is missing, and we are still looking at the right quarters for direction in terms of developing the proper narrative. Unfortunately, that still doesn't seem to have happened. Hamza, in your opinion, living abroad, what kind of perceptions have you seen among the people when they talk about Pakistan and when they talk about terrorism, especially when they see the tweets coming from the United States President, Mr. Trump? What reactions did you encounter?
Thank you very much. First of all, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned that, what do people think abroad? For example, what do Canadians think about Pakistan, about terrorism? And obviously, the media portrays Pakistan in a very different way, but what we tell them or what we convey the message is that Pakistan is not a terrorist country. Pakistan is affected by terrorism. And terrorism is affected, the whole world is affected by terrorism. The world needs to reunite. And coming back to the Trump tweets, obviously people do get confused, people do get angry, and people do get scared as well that, I mean, what is happening in the world? So coming back to the point that the world needs to reunite, the world needs to come together, and we need to fight terrorism together.
Absolutely. Sir, when we're talking about this particular attack in Quetta, there was reports that, of course, infiltration from the Afghan side is the most obvious, the obvious, what should one say, the perpetrator of this attack has come from the Afghan side. We've been talking about, fencing the border. We've been talking about the Americans or the Afghan army taking action in Afghanistan, but that seems to be to no avail, sir. So how are we supposed to monitor people traveling across the Afghan porous border, sir? And these attacks are going to keep on happening, especially now that we see the divergence in the US and American strategy.
You see, the protection of life and property of every citizen is the first and foremost responsibility of all and every countries. And any single death that occurs as a result of terrorism in Pakistan is a failure on the part of the state, on the part of state instruments or institutions, be it security agencies, be it the intelligence agencies. And there is a lesson behind every such incident. There is a weakness that is thrown up by the occurrence of every such incident. And you see, one of the major points within the National Action Plan was the repatriation of Afghan refugees. Quetta and Peshawar are the two cities which are most affected and continue to remain most vulnerable relatively against all such activities. In Quetta, we find the 30% population of Quetta city comprises of Afghan refugees. So it's very easy for the Afghanis to come in and blend in within that section of population and, of course, operate from there. while it will take a while for these Afghan refugees to repatriate, and then we are relatively secure and safe. But till that happens, we have to be on our guard. Of course, we have started fencing of the border. It will take some time. It's 2,600 kilometer long border. It's going to be very expensive, and I wonder whether the world or the US or the NATO allies would come into our assistance in raising this fence and setting up of those checkposts all along the border. But whether or not that happens, Pakistan has to do it, because that is one very effective way to check any cross-border movement, at least unauthorized movement, especially that of terrorists. And then, of course, there was the project of safe city for Quetta. Unfortunately, it has not happened. So monitoring of public movement, be it vehicular, be it pedestrian, cannot happen unless you have thousands of cameras placed. I mean, I know in all big cities they have hundreds of thousands of cameras monitoring, traffic, monitoring people, and discovering potential incidents before they happen. So, in the case of Quetta especially, which is most vulnerable to such like incidents, and which has been amply shown by occurrence of these incidents in the recent past. So, we need to make sure that this project is completed on priority, and places which are likely to be targeted by the terrorists are relatively protected a little more. And in this case, we have found that the security forces are being targeted by the terrorists the most. So, we need to make sure that all our such installations, all our such personnel are well protected, well guarded, and entry and exit to such areas where these people operate, or they have their offices or other positions, they must be well protected. And of course, they have to make sure that the ownership of this entire campaign that we have, this war that we have, is acquired, is adopted by the entire population. Until every single citizen in our country does not agree with this war, does not adopt it as his own war, and he participates in it by, of course, looking out, by supporting the intelligence and the security agencies, such incidents are likely to happen. Although we may say that it is not our war, well, and that participating in this war or joining this war was our biggest mistake. But the fact remains that we are engaged in it for the last 16 years. We have lost 70,000 people. We have lost 7,000 of our security and paramilitary and police personnel. And the financial losses are in excess of $130 billion. So despite that, if he's saying that it is not our war, come on. Even if it was not, but it is for the last 16 years, and we will not be able to fight and win this war till we say that it is on our own war. Of course, when hopefully we have won it, then we can go and carry out a post-mortem and say that it was not our war, it was thrust upon us, or we took it upon us as a mistake and then we suffered. Fine. But till that happens, you have to win it first. Only then you are able to reach that stage of post-mortem, carrying out its post-mortem. So, if we today say that it was not our war, we are going to be diluting our momentum. We are going to be, losing our focus. And similarly, while we say that people must own it and they must participate it, even they will disown it. They will not participate it when you publicly say it was not our war. It has to be our war till we win it. And then we, of course, get rid of it, and then we can declare it was not our war. Fine. We made a mistake, we joined in, we lost people, we lost money. But then
it's also a bit unfair to say that, sir, because as far as Pakistan is concerned, we don't have an option. I mean, whatever happens in our neighborhood directly affects us, and the spillover that takes place as a result of the ongoing situation in Afghanistan for the past 40, 50 years, it's like not very wise to close our eyes and think that it's not going to affect us.
You see, that was one reason that Pakistan joined in, because it would have spilled over regardless, and an effective way would have been to be part of it and make sure that it remains there and doesn't move in. But I think there we failed, we did not undertake adequate measures or policies wherein we could have prevented this spillover into our country. I mean, that is what happened. I mean, we had explosions all across the country. We lost people everywhere. And that is where I think we faltered. Because, of course, if you have a fire burning next to your neighborhood and you can't change your position, you are fixed over there and you have to feel the heat. And you undertake measures to minimize damage to yourself, which we did not take. And that is why we suffered and we are still suffering. And, but the fact remains that what I am trying to say is that we must not say that it was not our war. Because that is over. That is
we are way
behind us.
past that, sir.
We are way past it.
We are way past
we
that
are now
stage.
well in it. We are right in the middle of it. We have to win it. And then we can say, okay, it was not our war, we made a mistake. But right now, it is our war, we have to win it.
Point taken, sir. Hamza, when we talk about terrorism, there are many aspects to it, and especially the economic aspect is also very important. And you are also a student of economics as well. So when we talk about choking of funding for terrorist activities, what suggestions would you like to make in terms of how can we prevent terrorists from gaining funds in order to carry out their activities?
Well, first of all, I mean, terrorism, I mean, funds, obviously, when they don't have funds, they can't undergo their activities, right? So how should we stop that? There are a couple of, ways that we can do that, for sure. Like, we can cut down their communications, we can cut down their ways they get through, or we can cut their connections through which they get their funds. And if we overcome that, then it can be helpful in cutting down the terrorist activities.
So intelligence sharing is a very important aspect of trying to cut down on the terrorist funding. Sir, in your opinion, how can we proceed in that department, especially since we've also had statements coming from our defense minister saying that Pakistan has suspended military and intelligence cooperation with the US on the one hand, but we also have reports coming in from the US saying that they are still in contact with the Pakistani establishment and those meetings are secret.
I am of the view that Pakistan and the US are both indispensable for each other as far as this war is concerned. While we may have this political rhetoric of a war of words going on, but the fact remains the Americans cannot do without us and we cannot do without the Americans if we have to fight and win this war. So we have to maintain our links as far as intelligence sharing is concerned, as far as military assistance is concerned, because without that this war cannot go on. And we know that this war is yet to be won. And to win this war, these two things must happen, both intelligence as well as military assistance. And of course, while the Americans continue to blame us of safe havens, and we continue to remind them that, look, Mullah Fazlullah and TTP are still positioned in Afghanistan, we will not be able to take any actions against their supposed safe havens, that is to say, till they tell us where they are. And we, of course, have to give them ample and actionable intelligence that, look, TTP is operating over there and here is our evidence.
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We've been joined by Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Saab on the line with us. Thank you for joining us, Jaspal Saab. Sir, the question is that you must have also seen the statement that Pakistan has suspended military and intelligence cooperation with the US, according to Mr. Khurram Dastagir, the defense minister. How have you taken this statement, sir, and what are your views on it?
I think that the government of Pakistan has given a message to the Americans that if you wanted to continue a partnership with us or remain our ally in the fighting war on terrorism, then you have to behave, you have to acknowledge our sacrifices, and you have to also realize whatever you are investing or transferring it as this coalition support fund, that is not meant for our development, that is meant for the war. So the Americans' irrational behavior, especially this New Year infamous tweet, has also created a lot of uproar. My understanding is that it's a signaling or a message that, okay, if you want to do your military operation without us, because you have to not forget, they have said in the last week of December, the Vice President, that Pakistan is placed on a point, or on 17 December, Pentagon stated that we can go for a unilateral action. So if they wanted to do a unilateral action, then why they are expecting an export from Pakistan or export from Pakistan? So maybe that would be the reason of that. So that is my point, is that suspension will be a big signal for the Americans.
Right, sir. And also the other situation developing within the region, sir, the National Security Advisor, Mr. Janjua, has also said that regional powers need to cooperate and collaborate, and there should be a more proactive role by those countries that are actually affected by the terrorism which is in the region. So what hopes do you have for that, sir?
I think that General Janjua was coming up with the real point or a problem, and he hit the nail by stating that the regional powers have to cooperate. If you recall, all the academics have been recommending that the Afghanistan peace is only possible if there is a one-on peace supported by the regional actors, not by the extra-regional actors. Second is, if you see that there is an emerging Daesh within the Afghanistan, 43% areas of Afghanistan are ungovernable. Who are the major victims of that ungovernable area? Pakistan, because TTP is there. Iranians can be victims, the others can be victims. So that's why he is asking all the neighbors of Afghanistan, and especially Pakistan or the South Asian region countries, that if you wanted to get rid of the menace of terrorism, let's come on the table and talk about it. And we all work, instead of using them as proxy or ignoring them as a proxy, it's better we can join hand and fight against them. Then we will be able to quash, or you can say erase, the terrorism in the region. So it's a good move, and I hope that the other sides will start listening and cooperating on that issue.
Thank you, Jaspal Saab, for sharing your views with PTV World. Coming back to the studio now. So you heard what Jaspal Saab had to say, but Khurram Dastagir Khan Saab also had to say that the US is, we've been saying it for quite some time, they're busy in a blame game against Pakistan, rather than providing us with assistance and intelligence to secure the Pak-Afghan border. According to the United States Embassy in Islamabad, they say that they have not been informed about any suspension of cooperation by Pakistan. So why is there this disconnect between what our defense minister is saying and what the Americans are saying, sir?
Well, you see, in a political engagement, the statements always get made which are essentially not a policy line or a directive, but they are for the audience at home and elsewhere. And I like to add here one thing, that you see, the Americans have been saying and accusing Pakistan of safe havens for the last maybe 10, 12 years. And Pakistan has been making the same reply. Although we have undertaken operations in South Waziristan, we cleared that, in North Waziristan we cleared that, and several other valleys. And after Operation Zarb-e-Azab, we were able to claim to the Americans that we have cleared off our territory. And while we were undertaking these operations, we had asked the Americans that you should ban the border across either the Afghan forces or the Americans should, so that any fleeing elements should be engaged and eliminated. That did not happen. So there was a lack of cooperation from the American or the Afghani side. But the fact remains that their accusations have been same, they have been persistent, and our replies have been persistent, and they continue to be so, and now we find that the temperatures have raised. And I think we need to take it seriously, and we need to sit down with the Americans, engage them properly, and sort out as to what is the issue. While they are saying they are safe havens, we have been saying there are no safe havens. I mean, so somebody is right and somebody is wrong. So it has to be settled and clarified, because that is the only bone of contention. If you look at the entire rhetoric that is coming from the US side, the only element in their entire speech is safe havens.
So let's talk about that, sir. When we hear about these safe havens, and we've also gone hoarse saying that there are no safe havens. We have eliminated all those safe havens. But then when we witness these attacks that had the one that took place in Quetta and others that have also taken place, don't they sort of belie the statement that there are no safe havens? Obviously, as you also said in the beginning of the program, there is some kind of support that is being given to these people by those who are maybe ideologically or for any other reason financially aligned with these people. So how do we get rid of those elements? Of course, when we talk about specific safe havens as they were in Fatah before, right after 9/11, or the way the Afghan war materialized in this part of the world, sir, we did eliminate those safe havens. So now, what do you think is happening within Pakistan? What form have these safe havens sort of transformed into? Because they're obviously there. That's why they're able to carry out these attacks.
See, there are two sides to this. Attacks in Pakistan and attacks in Afghanistan. See, the Taliban have clearly stated that they have their objectives to liberate their country from American occupation. They have no objectives beyond the borders of Afghanistan. So we should believe that they will not be undertaking any such terrorist activity in Pakistan. Earlier on, they had, of course, even training grounds and even living areas in Waziristan and both North and South and other tribal agencies, of course, which are eliminated, and now we can claim that there are no Taliban, Afghan Taliban in Pakistan. But when this operation took place, even the Pakistani Taliban or the TTP also fled from here, and they went in and took refuge in Afghanistan. They settled there. Now, all those people are Pakistanis. They have kith and kin over here, and which of course are attached, related, and may even have sympathy with their cause, because you see, disillusionment within our population is present. People are people are illiterate, they are not educated, they are jobless. There is resentment against, and the difference between the haves and have-nots, the inequitable distribution of wealth, and then there are issues of the treatment of Muslim countries by the West. What happened in Libya, what happened in Iraq, what happened in Syria. So there is resentment all across the Muslim world, and when people question this and they do not find answers, then they take the law in their own hand, and they want to settle the score themselves and punish the West or the Americans for whatever they have done. And that is why we find in Pakistan the very educated young boys are very easily emotionally
swayed into
such things.
So we'll come back to that. We've just been joined by Imtiaz Gul Saab on the line with us. Thank you very much, Gul Saab, for being with us. Sir, the National Security Advisor, General Janjua, has urged regional powers to cooperate and collaborate. Do you see that happening anytime soon, sir?
Well, I think Pakistan, China, Russia and Iran, they already seem to be on the same page as far as counterterrorism and the issue of Afghanistan is concerned. However, they probably need to take this agreement in principle forward by creating joint surveillance, intelligence sharing mechanisms. But individually, bilaterally, I think there are certain arrangements in existence, but probably a regional mechanism would do the cause better.
And sir, in the aftermath of President Trump's tweet, do you think it's imperative that cooperation between the regional players when it comes to dealing with the Afghan problem, it becomes even more important? How would you say that this cooperation should go ahead?
Well, multilateral, bilateral cooperation is always desirable, whether it's about terrorism or trade or any other political issues. So the sooner all these countries join hands to find out ways and means to deal with the Afghan situation, to nudge all Afghan stakeholders into the negotiating table, the better.
All right, sir, thank you very much for sharing your views with PTV World. That was Mr. Imtiaz Gul, defense analyst, sharing his point of view. Coming back to the studio, sir. So let's also talk about General Janjua's point of view on this, and that's very important, especially in the backdrop of the souring of relations with the US. Although we do say that the goals and objectives in Afghanistan are shared between the US and Pakistan, but unfortunately the modus operandi is where we seem to differ. So in your opinion, sir, how can we reach the same how can we be so different in terms of what we want when we say that we have the same goals, but our ways of achieving those goals are different? In your opinion, where do you think the difference really lies, and how can we address it?
You see, China, Russia are both fearful of the presence of ISIS in Iran, in Afghanistan, and similarly, Iran is fearful of the same. And all these three countries are in touch with Taliban to seek their views and to possibly play a role in bringing about peace in Afghanistan. Because as long as Afghanistan remains in turmoil, ISIS can continue to grow and expand its presence. Now, Pakistan is essentially worried about the Indian influence in Afghanistan, whereas that doesn't bother China, or it doesn't bother Russia, or it doesn't bother Iran. So that is where the difference lies. But of course, Pakistan would want a peaceful Afghanistan, because as long as it is not peaceful, we will continue to be having a difficult and turbulent western border, which is going to result into such like incidents that we happened in Quetta. So I think peaceful Afghanistan is an objective which everybody wants, at least the regional countries. And that is where I think there's a great potential for these four countries to get together and pursue both the Taliban as well as the Afghan government, and eventually with the Americans, to bring about peace in Afghanistan. And in the process, if Pakistan can get their concurrence to minimize the role of the Indians in Afghanistan, I think that would be bonus for us. But peace is something, a peaceful Afghanistan is something which everybody wants.
Absolutely, sir. Hamza, if we were to ask you that, how can you promote a positive image of Pakistan being in Canada when questions about terrorism are asked, and when we talk about the situation in this part of the world, what do you recommend should be the way that you would represent Pakistan's point of view when it comes to fighting the war on terror?
Okay, so first of all, Canada is a very multiculturalism country, and everyone knows that. Now, when you talk about terrorism, obviously it affects people's mind, because it depends how the media portrays it. Now, if we show the good side of Pakistan, for example, if we show the northern side of Pakistan, tell the tourists that they should come to Pakistan, it's a safe country. Now, we've told them that terrorism was just a single part of a country, let's just say North Waziristan, South Waziristan, and it has been cleared. So if we show the good image of Pakistan and we promote to...
No, but I'm asking you, how is it that you recommend that we should show the good image of Pakistan? Showing the mountains, we've already done all of that. So how do we put our message across? How do we make the Western world believe Pakistan's point of view and narrative when it comes to fighting the war on terrorism, and not the Western point of view that Pakistan is part of the problem, not part of the solution? Because Pakistan is fighting this war, of existential war, in fact, to survive in this environment. So what is the solution? How do we present Pakistan to be a solution of the problem rather than being part of it?
Well, we know that Pakistan is fighting war terrorism for more than a decade now, right? And we show them our achievement, that what have we done? How many, soldiers have been martyred, how many...
We've done all of that. Despite that, the message doesn't seem to be getting through in the West. So what would you say that is lacking in our narrative, or in the way that we communicate our ideas and our perceptions?
I think the media needs to portray it better, because we've done everything that we can to, get a good image out of Pakistan to the Western countries, and I think the media plays a very important role, because everybody watches media. So I think media should definitely show the positive side of Pakistan.
And what about the Foreign Office and the other departments which have this job to actually promote Pakistan abroad?
Well, obviously, Foreign Office and all the other departments that deal with the Western countries should collaborate with the media, should collaborate with the Western world, and then tell the people that what is Pakistan and how beautiful and how peaceful is it.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, so let's come back to the point of the souring of relations between the U.S. and Pakistan, and that one of the suggestions that have been bandied about are that the way after Salalah, the routes were stopped for the Americans. Maybe that should be one of the options that Pakistan should also exercise now that the Americans have blamed us for being liars and being deceitful.
You see, in that case, it was a very tragic incident where we lost, I think, more than 24 of our soldiers, and which is a, I think, blatant callousness on part of the NATO forces, and of course, which just could not go unnoticed, and we had to take some action. But in the present case, I mean, the situation is where the Americans are not believing what we are saying. We have not been able to make them agree or convince them of our viewpoint. That is that when we say that we have undertaken these operations and we have cleared off the areas and there are no safe havens, and they continue to say that there are safe havens. And while our statements, they have declared them as lies, which is of course a very undiplomatic language, but we can spare Donald Trump because he is not a politician or a diplomat, he is just a businessman. So you can, spare him. And do not get carried away by the word lies and deceit. But the reality is that they have not believed what we are saying. I think there is, as I said earlier, there is food for thought for us over here. We need to see as to why is it that they are not believing, and we need to do something more which is more convincing for them.
Well, that's what they've been saying, do more, sir.
By when they say do more, they mean, in their war against terror. But here we are, it is our
we need
cause.
to do more for ourselves.
We need to do more for ourselves, in which we must make sure that they believe. And because there is something missing.
Absolutely, sir.
There is something
some
missing.
kind of a disconnect.
There is a disconnect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we need to, our foreign office, our diplomats, our politicians, our security apparatus has to find out what is that element which is missing, which is not, which is denying us the ability to convince them.
Sir, one of the other things that General Janjua put forward, he called on the international community to tackle the thriving narcotics industry in Afghanistan, which he says feeds this monster of terrorism. So in that sort of realm, sir, where do you think the war against terror really stands? Because before the war on terror, there was a war on drugs, which kind of got a little misplaced during the war on terror.
I was just reading a report sometimes back when the Americans occupied Afghanistan in 2002. The annual production of opium was around 200 tons. And the recent estimates say it's over 8,000 tons. And the biggest beneficiary or the client or the customer of this drug is the USA. And there are several beneficiaries starting from Afghanistan all the way to the US. And when we say that we need to curb or eliminate this trade or this traffic, we are going to be killing the interests of all these people who are involved in this trade. And those people are from, all
diverse backgrounds.
Yes.
Just to put it mildly.
So, I think while this is a genuine concern and it has to be addressed because it is happening in our neighborhood and it is going to affect us one day if it is not curbed. But at the moment, I think our foremost priority is terrorism and not drugs. We can take care of the drugs later on, but we have to kill the terrorism first. And unless we say that the drugs are causing terrorism, I don't know, will that be correct or not? Because basically what is hurting us is terrorism.
Yeah, but they're funding their terrorist activities from the drug money that
Of
they
course,
get.
I don't know, Mullah Fazlullah is beneficiary of this drug trade or not. Where is he getting his funding from? The Americans are funding him, the Indians are funding him, but there is every possibility.
Well, sir, we leave it at that. Thank you very much for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. Well, you heard the conversation, and I would urge you to draw your own conclusions from this conversation. But in the end, we hope and we urge the Americans to see Pakistan's point of view and try to cooperate with us in trying to end the Afghan war and bring peace to this region. With that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.